Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Organizational Development and Governance webinar. Little housekeeping items on how to use our software. First, if you haven't done so, please click on your audio setup wizard, which is the microphone at the top that has what looks like a little red flower, and run your audio setup wizard. If you're using a teleconference line, we do have the teleconference set up so that you could mute your computer and listen via a phone. Right here are the whiteboard tools used for writing on the screen and writing responses to our questions. We won't be using those functions today, as this is just more of an educational webinar. Down here at the bottom, as some of you guys have used, is the chat function. It's very similar to popular chat devices such as Yahoo or MSN Messenger, where you just type in and hit return and we will see your responses. Over here to the middle left is our quick responses for polling and hand raising. If you have a question, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand and we will address your question. We do ask that all questions be held until the end of the webinar, where we will have an opportunity to address all the questions at the same time. At the end of the webinar, if you click File, scroll down to Exit so that you could actually exit the session, and that'll help us to know when everybody's done with the survey at the end. About the Alaska Region Center here, we have 3 main staff members who participate in the ANA technical assistance. We have Anthony Keoli, who is our regional director, who brings 19+ years of work experience in the areas of capital project development, fundraising, municipal and tribal management. He was very influential in a big merger in the community of Quinnahock. As you can see there, he pioneered the municipal tribal merger there. Next, we have Angela Camos, who's our Training and Technical Assistance Manager. For those of you who have participated in any of our regional trainings on how to apply for funding, you might have met Angela, and you know that she comes with a diverse array of information in terms of clients and the training, the executive coaching, and she's a huge asset here at the Alaska Region TTA Center. Lastly, you have myself. My name's Charles Peel. My background is I have a lot of project management, as well as I really like to push the envelope in terms of delivering new technologies to rural communities. We also do maintain a huge, or not a huge, but a sizable pool of consultants with various areas of expertise so that we could better serve the clients that we maintain. A little more about us. We do provide free training in the areas of project planning and development, pre-application, and post-award. There's also free technical assistance in project planning and development, pre-application. If your application is approximately 75% complete, you could work with us to get some electronic technical assistance on that. We do have on-site technical assistance if your project's running into some issues, as well as unfunded and grantee training. We do provide a lot more information in terms of the different services that we provide under ANA at our www.anaalaska.org website. Some of the things that we do offer are Google Plus communities that we encourage people to collaborate with, both nationally and regionally. One of the biggest ones that we do have there is our Native Languages community. You could go to the website there and find the Native Languages community and follow a lot of the progress that is being made there. Also, you could go to the National ANA website, which is www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA. And they have a lot more of an extensive list of resources for both our region and across the national content as well. ANA has a vision. It's their mission that Native communities are thriving, and they do this by promoting their self-sufficiency by providing the discretionary grant funding for community-based projects. We do like to promote the other webinars coming up, and we do have a list out. You could go to the website, our website, and register under our webinars tab, or you can go to the website listed here and look at ANA program events. The leveraging resources happening next week, creating a business plan to generate project income the week after. And please note that all of our webinars do start at the same time. We try to give a showing here of each region, but we do maintain that the webinars do start at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So take a look at what that would be in each of your time zones. The webinar goals for today, we have 3 goals. We want to learn about the government and organizational structures. We want to learn about tribal councils and administration roles and responsibilities with a focus on developing and administering grant awards. And last, we want to take a look and learn the essentials on the ANA CFR grant requirements. Jim Sanders will be our lead presenter today. He is originally from Juneau, Alaska, but has moved to Anchorage and lived there for the last 34 years. Jim has a degree in behavioral science from Portland State University, has a master's in public administration from the University of Washington. For the past 40 years, he has worked statewide with Alaska Native communities addressing a huge array of social, economic, and local governance issues. Jim retired from the state of Alaska as the Alaska Workforce Investment Board Director in 2002. Since that time, he has worked as a consultant for a variety of organizations working on rural Alaska development concerns. I will now turn it over to Jim.
Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. I just need to get it set up here. I'm very happy to be here today, and both happy and a little nervous. This is my first webinar, so hopefully everything goes well. I'll give it my best. Your first slide has a diagram of what we all know, kind of the organizational structure for government throughout the U.S. So most government in the U.S. has 3 branches: the executive, legislative, and judiciary. And kind of starting at the federal level, we know that there's, the executive is the president, the legislative is Congress, and the judiciary is the federal court system. The state government, we have a governor and a legislature, a state court system. And for tribal government, you have chief, president, or whatever you choose to call your executive, normally a tribal council, and a tribal court system. These are the basic structures that parallel one another throughout government in the U.S. All government, whether it is federal, state, or tribal, have the same basic structures and responsibilities. So whether you're a tribe, the state, county, or federal government, you have these basic branches in place. The executive branch operates government and enforces the laws. The executive staff administers the government agencies, departments, and programs. The legislative branch of government is primarily responsible for making laws. The legislature also approves the budgets. The judicial branch has a primary responsibility to interpret and apply the laws and assure the constitutionality, and also to resolve disputes. As a part of that, primarily through the executive branch, we have administrative regulations and policies and procedures that are developed by the agencies or the departments. The agencies and departments are responsible to perform the day-to-day work of the government and to follow the laws. The agencies are also charged with creating regulations that organizations must follow when performing work in their jurisdiction. So this is where ANA regulations would come from, or from any state or from a tribal government. I believe most of the people here today are from tribal governments, but there may also be individuals from nonprofits or profit corporations. And they are structured along the same lines, but a little bit differently. They normally would have a board of directors, and their power comes from their articles of incorporation. They would have a board, which is responsible for creating the mission and the vision of the organization, and they would monitor the organizational and the executive staff for their performance. They would provide advice on strategic and operational direction and ensure fiscal responsibility. Most boards, nonprofit boards, have committees that handle larger matters that are brought to the board for a vote, such as executive compensation, compliance, strategic planning, mergers, and acquisitions. Just like the governmental structure that we just looked at, they also have an administration that develops policies and procedures through departments or divisions that are responsible to perform the day-to-day work of the organization, following their own policies and procedures. So now we want to look a little bit at the roles and responsibilities of both the executive branch and also the administrative branch of or section of government. Proposal, roles, and development. Where can a project idea originate? For most communities, a lot of their plans for a project come from an existing plan that has already set community priorities. An important thing to remember if you're using an existing plan is that if it is a number of years old, that it really should be updated or at least validated by a recent community meeting where the community or the tribe is given an opportunity to reaffirm the priorities that have been set, or maybe to reorder them. But an existing plan is a fairly common way for identifying an idea for a project. A lot of communities who don't have a plan or just want to have something that is more current might have a community or tribal planning meeting in which the community is invited, and they perhaps would go through a process to identify community needs, go through a prioritization process, and identify a prioritized list for needs and projects within the community, which then could be the basis and support a grant proposal. Also, emergency situations can also certainly dictate and set the idea for a project that a community needs. Also, the need can be identified by a department combined with a funding opportunity. Perhaps, for instance, a school or the school system has some money available to do a language program, but they don't have sufficient funding. They could approach the tribe to see if their partnership could be formed, and in turn the tribe would have to go through a community process to make sure that that was a priority need. But if it was, they could then work with the school and apply for ANA language funds. Also, there are community partnerships where several organizations can come together and try to find a way of using each of their resources to address a community need. Again, you need to be able to demonstrate that there is community support for anything that you put forward in a grant as a proposal. And also, the council can initiate or direct the administration to develop an application for a grant, so long as it can demonstrate that it has community support. Well, we've talked a little bit about how projects and ideas can originate. We need to talk a little bit about where they should not originate. Any plan or proposal without community review and support setting it as a priority should not be used. Over the years, I've worked with communities that may have a road plan or a health plan or some other utility plan that certainly addresses needs within the community, but perhaps has not gone through the community process to demonstrate that it is fully supported and a high priority for the community. Don't use that plan unless you can verify that. Also, jumping after a great funding opportunity without adequate consideration can be a real problem for communities. I know I talked with several communities in Alaska when the SEEDS program was initially presented. They saw an opportunity with a lot of money and were quite eager to pursue it, but really hadn't thought out the full ramifications of what it was they were going to do. It's very important to think about, what you're doing and not just jump at a funding opportunity. Special interest can also see an opportunity, a financial opportunity. Very important for the tribe or your organization to make sure that whatever you're doing is not just benefiting a particular financial interest within your community. And last, but certainly not least, projects written by consultants that lead to the hiring of the consultant to complete the project are a major concern for ANA, and it should be for your community also. So please avoid that scenario, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So how does a community go about identifying their priority needs? Well, let's look at what the council responsibilities are in that process. Planning, the council has the authority and ability to plan for immediate and long-term needs. That is their charge and their responsibility. So they should be involved in identifying the needs of the community. The council also has the ability to direct the development or the update of community development plans. We've talked a little bit about that. The council also has the authority to establish planning goals, time frames, and evaluation expectations. And certainly the council has a responsibility to keep codes and policies current. Sometimes your policies might be needed to change to existing situations in your community, or also to help support a proposal that is being put forth to a funding agency. The council also has the ability to set administrative priorities, and finally, the council has the ability to approve funding and grant requests. Not only the ability, but actually the responsibility to approve all grant requests that would go forward to a funding agency. So we can see that the council has a number of different roles that it can play in the development and or the support of the development of a proposal. let's look a little bit about the responsibilities that a council would have in the administration of a grant. Well, they have the authority to review and approve a grant proposal for submittal. We've already mentioned that. I would recommend that also the council become familiar with the grant regulations that are related to a proposal that is going to be submitted. And this could be an opportunity for the administration to more fully familiarize the council with a particular grant and also identify the major issues that the administration is going to have to deal with and how the council could support them. It's also important to review the council members' responsibilities as it relates to a proposal that is going forward or even that has been funded. And that is also to make sure they understand what they can do and what they should not be doing. The council has the ability to conduct investigations and establish policies. Investigations might be if they felt that a project was getting off course, they could investigate and determine what the problems were. Or they could establish policies that were going to support the implementation of the project. Councils can set and interpret its own operation rules. I'll mention one problem that I'm aware of that we've had in Alaska, where councils normally don't meet in the summer because they're busy doing subsistence activities. And that has created problems in the past for the administration of some grants. Councils can set aside that rule and agree to meet at least once during the summer to approve or review some document or some procedure that is essential to the success of a project. Councils can also legislate for the community, and another important thing that they have potentially related to a grant is approve the hiring of staff. And that depends on how your community or tribe is set up. For some lower level positions, that might be the authority of the administration, and there might be a cutoff or a level that has to be approved by the council. But that should be reviewed and everyone aware of before you begin. Here are some things that the council members don't do that are related to the administration of a grant. Council members do not have grant administrative responsibilities. And I have been involved in a few instances where council members want to become involved in the day-to-day administration of a grant. Naturally, they're committed to their community, they're interested in a project, they want to make sure that it is successful, but they need to understand that there is a separation between their role and the administrative role. Council members do not supervise or direct administrative staff. They must direct their concerns through the administrative manager. And that's something that you might want to cover with your council very early on at the onset of a grant or a project. What their role is, what they can do, and who they should talk to if they have issues or concerns or see ways that the project could be enhanced. Council members should not become involved with subcontractors. If you hire consultants or individuals who are not city employees but doing a part of your project, it's not the role of the council members to speak directly or direct the subcontractors. Again, they would need to go through the administrative manager to put forth their ideas. And council members should always avoid a real or an appearance of a conflict of interest. If council members are approving the hire of someone or the award of a contract and they have a direct relationship to that individual or that organization, it's a normal practice to declare that to the council and let the council decide whether or not there is a conflict of interest. But you always want to make sure that the public is reassured that there has been no conflict of interest in both hiring and award decisions. And council members should not stop a project because the membership of the council has changed. And this has happened several times in projects that I've worked on in Alaska, where during the life of the project there is a new election and the council changes and the leadership of the council changes, and they're not happy with the project or don't think it should be a priority. However, once the tribe has signed a contract, they are obligated to continue that, and it's extremely important to make sure new members and the leadership of the tribe understand that if there is a change during the implementation of a grant. So we've talked a bit about council members' responsibilities, what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And let's take a little time and talk about what administrators' responsibilities are and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Administrator responsibilities in administering a grant. Number one, review the job descriptions, policies, and procedures for your organization. You want to make sure that you fully understand the policy and the procedures of your organization and make sure that they fit both with the application that you're submitting or with the implementation of a project that's been awarded. Also, job descriptions of staff. Very important to fully understand that. If you're going to be assigning additional duties to individuals, and make sure that it fits within their job description or they have the skills and abilities to carry out that. That way you're protecting both the likelihood of success for the project and also helping ensure that the individual is going to function at an optimum level, or know that they might need additional training before they take on certain responsibilities. Learn the various activities and timelines of your grants. The timelines and the activities are extremely important to keeping the project on time, on track, and also for reporting. We want to make sure that the administrator fully understands that. Also, at all times, the administration should be monitoring the program budget and expenditures. They should be directly involved in ensuring that the project is staying on budget and also approving expenditures and ensuring that they are within the guidelines of a grant. The administrators should also ensure that the development and maintenance of the required database is in the records. This is frequently a problem, in communities where the record keeping is not always as accurate as should be. You want to always be able to come back and demonstrate that you have performed in accordance with the grant, and it also helps ensure the executive branch that you're doing the job that you are charged with. You want to ensure compliance with the terms and conditions of the grant. So that means you need to become very familiar with them, read through them, make sure you understand them, make sure the staff that are related or have anything to do with the terms and conditions also understand them. You want to prepare and submit timely financial and program reports. This is an A&A expectation, and any other grant program is also going to be expecting that also. You want to keep the council and the public informed on the project progress. And this is sometimes something that is not written into a grant, but I think it's extremely important. If you keep both the council and the public fully informed on what's happening with your project, you're going to have continued success or support for the project, both while the project is ongoing and once the project is completed. If the public and the council know about your successes and about what has been accomplished, they're going to help ensure that the project is successful and continues beyond the funding period. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial management systems. Financial management systems, almost no matter where you are, have three parts. There's the budget, there's financial controls and procedures, and financial record keeping. And you want to make sure that these parts are always in place and and you, as the administrator, you understand these three parts. Every budget, whether it's a travel operation budget or a grant budget, is basic to the planning process. If you are developing a project, you are actually developing the budget. As you begin to look at the different components of a project, you need to look at the time, the staff, the materials, basically building a list of the expenditures that are required to make the project a success. That is key to building the budget. Also, for a budget, you need the summary of the project funds and where they were spent. This is, as a project is enacted, you really need to know, and I've already talked about this a little bit, but you need to know where your funds for your project are located. You may have several funding sources, and with many ANA grants, with all ANA grants, you have to have match. It could come from several sources. You want to make sure that you're keeping track of that. Staff know where the funding sources are coming from, and they are also documenting that. You also want to be able to document how those funds are used. Also, for a budget, each year of a project should have a budget. That is an ANA requirement, and that is also what most tribal and nonprofit organizations have, is an annual budget. The council should monitor and be frequently involved with the budget process. Most organizations do financial reports to their council on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And you want to make sure that the council knows how the funds are being spent as it relates to your budget, and that you're on track. Nothing worse than for a council to be surprised by the funding agency suddenly contacting them and saying, where is the money going? Why are you spending it this way? To keep the council informed, they know what's happening, and they can certainly help you if there are any problems arise and advise you. If there are minor changes to the budget, usually that's an administrative rule. With an ANA grant, of course, if you're going to change even a minor administrative thing, you want to make sure ANA knows and that you've got their concurrence. However, for most organizations, major changes to a budget would be both a council and the funding agency's prerogative to be involved and approve it. So if you're moving major amounts of money from one line item in a budget to another, make sure that you've got council understanding and approval before you go to the funding agency and get their approval. And finally, your budget is the basis for all ANA financial reports. It's the document in which you report against, and a way of demonstrating and showing that you're moving forward. Financial controls and procedures. To properly monitor and manage finances, defined controls and procedures must be in place for receiving and spending money. These are a couple questions that you should ask. Does your organization have a written financial control and procedures manual? It seems basic, that would be in place, but I have worked with communities where that is not in place. If it isn't, it's something you should certainly work towards establishing, contacting other communities, seeing if you can review theirs to maybe model yours, but it is something that should be there for the successful administration of a grant. Have you reviewed it and you do understand it? That's also very important. Make sure you understand your financial control and procedures manual. That's going to keep you on track, and it's going to certainly help with the administration of the grant. Also, does it meet the requirements of an ANA grant? ANA, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment, but ANA has certain things that their expectations. You want to make sure that your financial system is in line with what ANA expects. Here are some basic financial controls that your community should have. You need to identify who can receive and deposit and record funds. Sounds really basic, but you should make sure that it's just not anyone going to the mail picking up a check or requesting funding coming to the community. You need to have specific people identified who have that responsibility. Cash should never be used for payment. And by that I mean for a large payment, for payroll, for purchasing equipment. That should always be done by check. Now, certainly petty cash for small purchases, for buying stamps, for buying some small items. Certainly your organization could and probably has a petty cash fund, and that can then be charged back to a grant as petty cash or to the appropriate place. You should have 2 signing officers to approve a check. I've worked with communities where both the person approving a check and also signing the check are the same person. Not a good system. You want to make sure that there are enough checks and balances to assure both the funding organization and your own executive branch, your own council, that you have checks in place that are going to ensure that funds are appropriated and used correctly. You can help ensure that by having 2 signing officers who approve a check and also having 2 officers who are signing the check. I also worked with a community once that one of the signaries for the check could not read, and the other one was blind. That led to some major problems. So you want to make sure the people who sign checks are also fully capable of reviewing and ensuring that they're signing an appropriate check request or check. Policy should outline the extent and levels of individuals to commit funds and for what purposes, whether the policy is going to allow the administrator to do up to a certain level, and beyond that level it has to have council approval. Bank accounts should be reconciled monthly. I think most are. They should also have a purchase order system. A purchase order system is extremely important, particularly with a grant, if you are buying any equipment, because you need to be able to demonstrate that you have purchased equipment that was approved both within the budget, grant budget, and also that you have stayed within the funding amount allotted for that. And ultimately, for anyone coming back and checking on property, there is a record, a chain that you can look through to see how equipment was purchased. And that in turn can be linked to your property management system. If you are buying property, if you're buying computers, camera equipment, you want to be able to keep track of that and have a system in place so that you don't lose important items that you may want in the future. Financial record keeping. And the financial record keeping is the way your tribe's financial information system is organized. And I'm not going to talk about specific systems because there are so many different systems out there. But your own particular system, you want to make sure that you understand how that system works. Also, you want to know how will the financial management system staff understand the particular requirements of a grant, so that if you have an ANA grant, or if you have another a grant coming into your community, you want to make sure that any particular requirements or reporting requirements, etc., are fully understood by the people who are administering the financial management system. This is going to avoid problems in the future if everyone is on the same plane and operating from the same issues that have to be accounted for. And here are some special administrative issues that you really need to be aware of that relate to the Code of Federal Regulations and the ANA Funding Opportunity Announcement requirements. We've already talked a little bit about this, but do not use consultants to write grants without great oversight. I worked with a couple communities who hired consultants who in turn wrote wonderful grants. They were funded. The grant agreement came back to the community, and that was the first time the community really looked carefully at what they had committed to do, and suddenly found themselves without the expertise or the ability to actually implement the grant the way it was written. There wasn't adequate funding for hiring staff or training staff. So make sure that if you use a consultant that there is very, very careful oversight role and review before anything goes forward to be approved for funding. Conflict of interest. Always make sure that conflict of interest is taken into consideration. You want to make sure that you avoid, your organization avoids any real conflict of interest or even implication of a conflict of interest for hiring, contracting, or awards. And I've already talked a little bit about that, but one way is to always make sure that the council and the public know that you've declared a conflict of interest, and a decision is made whether or not that is valid or not, and then you can move forward with hiring, contracting, or awarding. Conflict of interest extends from the administrator to the council. That we've already talked about that. It's important to understand the conflict of interest can be both an administrative and a council concern. Do not allow council members to become involved in the grant administration. That's only going to confuse the workers who are performing and implementing a grant, because suddenly they have several bosses. You want to avoid that. If a council member has an idea or has a concern, they should always be directed to the chief administrator for that grant. If it can't be resolved at that level, moving it on up the chain through your organization would be the way to approach council members being involved inappropriately in a grant. You want to know and document procurement procedures. We've already talked about that. Very important to be able to document how you've proceeded with procurement. Know and document hiring procedures. That's also extremely important for the Federal Code of Regulations and the FOA. Avoid giving staff duties for a grant beyond their capabilities. Talked a little bit about that. It's certainly attempting to do that, but you want to make sure that you're not giving responsibilities to an individual outside of the purview of their job. No double pay staff through the use of various contracts. By that, I mean many organizations have a variety of funding sources, and to pay for staff, you draw from each one of those funding sources. When you add them all up, you should not be drawing more than 100% of any staff's salary. So if you have 3 funding sources and you're getting 40% of the staff or the payroll from each one of those, you're going to end up with 120% of the staff pay coming in from various grants. Don't want to do that. That's a big no-no. Pay all payroll taxes on time. If you don't, there are penalties and interest that you accrue, and you cannot pay those through your grant. That would be a tribe or your organization's responsibility. Also, it's a disservice to your employees to not be paying into your Social Security. And I've worked with communities where it's very easy when money is tight to skip a month or 2 of paying taxes. Please don't do that. That will always lead to problems. Don't use grant funds for other purposes. Sometimes a need within a community arises. You need extra money. It's not available in your general fund. You see a pot of money over here in a grant, and you're just going to borrow it for a little while. That ultimately leads to a lot of problems. Don't do that, ever. And finally, do not ignore ANA requests for information or offers of help. ANA's interest always is to the success of the project, and are more than willing to help communities guarantee that success. If they ask for information or they offer help, be more than willing to reciprocate or to follow through. If you need help, always be willing to ask. Here are some other important issues that you may want to ask. And we've already talked about some of these, but does your organization have personnel policies and procedures? You have to have them. So you should make sure that they are there and they are up to date. If your organization is not a tribe or Alaska Native village, the majority of the board membership must be Native American. So for nonprofits, that is a real concern. All ANA grant applications must have documentation that the governing body has approved the application. That is extremely important, or your project proposal will not go forward. So always make sure that that's in place. I did work with the community a couple of summers ago, developed a great application, and the council had left for the summer, and were not able to get the approval they needed. So it's very important to make sure that that is in place as soon as you can actually get it. Does your organization have safeguards against conflict of interest by staff, consultants, or council members? I think I've talked enough about that. That's pretty clear. Okay, so what did we cover today? We talked about governmental organizational structure and how it is similar whether you're federal, state, or tribal level. We also talked about tribal council administrative roles and the responsibilities of each, with a focus on developing and administering grant awards. Also, we touched upon the essentials of the Code of Federal Regulations and the Federal Opportunity Announcement, or FOA, grant requirements. So thank you very much, and that is the presentation.
Thank you, Jim. And next, we will be moving into questions and answers. If you guys have any questions from anything that Jim presented or any general questions, please type them into the chat box and we will answer your questions accordingly. Also, we will be working on excuse me, I'm trying to load up our evaluation for you guys to take a look at and fill out. Well, unfortunately, I will link it. Is it cutting that off? I apologize. So, do we have any questions from anybody? There's our evaluation. give it a few more minutes. It looks like we have one question or comment being typed in, and want to make sure we give you guys the opportunity to get the information you need. The question is the Tribal Council resolution required as a part of the initial application, or can it come in later?
Oh, I had to remember to turn my sound on here. It has to accompany the application, otherwise it won't be able to move forward. It's an essential part.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop our recording. And just so you guys know, if you want a copy of the PowerPoint from today, please email me, or I could email it out as a off of our listserv. But the recording of this will be posted onto YouTube, so you guys could view it again at a future date. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.